I went home and I prayed about it. I had never had a proposition to make $1 million a year before. And I was also making no income. I was brand new into entrepreneurship. I had recently been fired. I had no income. And I mean, zero income. There was all of these reasons why I should say yes to this proposition. And ultimately, I said no. And I walked away. Deep in the human unconscious is a pervasive need for a logical universe that makes sense. But the real universe is always one step beyond logic. That's from Frank Herbert, the author of Dune. Listen, guys, welcome into this week's episode of the Dynamis Podcast. And before we kick things off, before we get into this week's episode, I want to just take a minute and express my extreme and profound gratitude that I have for you as the audience for tuning in each and every single week. It's incredible. The stories that have been shared with me, the text messages that people have sent me, how a message that a guest has given has inspired them to start their own business or feel encouraged through the week or take a nugget of information and implement it into their personal lives. And that is exactly the mission statement of this podcast. I want all of you guys to have the tools to be able to pick yourselves up, to build your arc, and to weather the storm ahead. And I cannot express to you how much it means to me to look at the stats each and every week and see as our listenership creeps up, as the downloads continue to grow, as episodes listened and subscribers continue to grow. I'm just absolutely blown away at the steady growth that is starting to snowball and the momentum behind that. I cannot express enough how truly grateful I am for you, the listeners, to be on this journey. We are all in this together. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. This week's episode, we're going to go into one of my classic monologues. As you may or may not know, I really enjoy writing. I used to spend a ton of time writing. I was always writing. Whether I was overseas in the military on deployment, whether I was home as a kid, I just always journaled. I always wrote things down. I remember being on airplanes as a young man, just looking out the window and writing my thoughts down, really with no objective other than I just thought it was really profound how my articulation of words and my interpretation of the lived experience that I was walking through could move me emotionally. I could reread those words and have a solid, tangible construct of what I was feeling and thinking. And I've always been blown away at the ability to write effectively, to communicate via written word on paper. And I started writing all the time. I even started a blog eventually that I hid. I disguised as a barbecue blog. Really, it was poetry. I started a barbecue brand called Skookum Barbecue, and the outlet that provided for me was incredible. I wanted to use this week's episode as the audible version of that blog. And how I'm going to do this week is really just process the thoughts, the feelings, the lessons learned in business that I've had recently in hopes that my takeaways, my journaling at the end of the week can help you as well. If you're not right where I am at this level or beyond me or even right behind, hopefully these breadcrumbs and these lessons learned could be added to your toolkit so that it can accelerate your growth in your journey. I want to kick off with just one more quote. And then we're going to get into why I chose to turn down a multi-million-dollar offer, an offer of at least $1 million a year in salary when I had recently been fired, had zero income, why I made that decision to walk away from that option, and what ultimately that led to. But first, before we get in there, I wanted to open up with one more additional quote from the author of Dune, Frank Herbert, and that is this. The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. When I first got fired from the fire department, it was a whole new adventure for me. I had started some level of entrepreneurship. I was building a real estate portfolio with my wife. We were slowly and opportunistically adding properties to my portfolio, but by no means was it providing a healthy enough income for me to live off of, especially with kids. And so an immediate solution for me was jumping into mortgage origination. Now, I never had an overwhelming passion for mortgages, I just knew the industry. I grew up in the industry. My mom had been a mortgage originator for many years. I understood sales. I saw it as a vehicle where I could really control my future to some degree while I figured out what the thing is that I am actually going to build. And so I started hustling. I immediately jumped into social media. I was building up my client list. I was walking open houses. And I went to coffee one time for a networking group. And there was an individual in there that said I should connect with a mortgage originator who had a large book of business and was wanting to offload that book of business because he wanted to retire. So I went to meet this individual and we hit it off. He was a great guy. We had a lot of things in common. He was a veteran and he, in fact, did want to retire. And his proposition to me was that he would take me into his office. I would come under his wing, essentially learn his systems, learn how he's doing business, how he's executing, and then slowly over time transition, over like a 3-year period, transition out of the business and hand over the entire book of business to me. And he would make a residual of that back end. Now, he was currently, he's making around 7 figures a year in gross commissions, and he has a team in place that wanted to stay. And up front, as I was stepping into that role, he was going to pay me a salary on top of that. And just to sweeten the deal, he happened to own the building that the company was located in. And I said, would you be interested in not only letting me step into this book of business, but having me take over this building as well? And would you be willing to own or finance that? Because, the real estate investor in me has to ask. Why wouldn't you ask? His reply was absolutely. He wanted me to go home and really think about what that would look like. He went home, talked to his wife. He called me back over the weekend and said, hey, listen, I think it would be a good idea for you to come in, get a feel for the office, and let's see how we can get this done. I went home and I prayed about it. I had never had a proposition to make $1 million a year before. I was also making no income. I was brand new into entrepreneurship. I had recently been fired. I had no income. And I mean, zero income. There was all of these reasons why I should say yes to this proposition. And ultimately, I said no. And I walked away. And I'll tell you why I walked away. It was a very extremely difficult decision to walk away from a value proposition like that, especially when you're in somewhat of a poverty mindset, scarcity, like you don't have enough, you're not going to provide. I went home and I really prayed and meditated on what is it that I wanted. And ultimately, the conclusion that I came to was this would be an excellent ladder to climb. But when I got to the top of that ladder, what would it feel like if I climbed the wrong ladder? If in fact, all of that work, all of that transition, the income, what if it was the wrong ladder? And I had to ask myself, what's the most important thing? Is it money? And absolutely, money wasn't the most important thing. For me, it was alignment and mission. What did I believe in? What was I working on? What did I want to be a part of? And was I willing to sacrifice money? If money was the master, then I would have made the choice to just stay at the fire department in the first place. But clearly, money wasn't the number one factor for me. I was on a mission to accomplish something more. And on top of that, I had to ask myself, well, what is it that I am trying to accomplish? What am I trying to build? And do I have the faith in myself to persevere, persist, endure, and build it? And ultimately, it may have been some level of being naive because you don't know what you don't know when you first enter the world of business. I bet on myself because why would I not bet on myself? Every single time in the history of my life, I've bet on myself and I've been successful. I'm undefeated in life up to this point. That doesn't mean I haven't been smacked around, I haven't failed, I haven't been discouraged, but ultimately God has always provided. I've always prevailed. And so if I was going to bet on myself in any time of my life, why would it not be right now? And if I was going to bet on anybody, why would it not be me? And so I turned down this offer, comfort, security, a guarantee, because I knew I would be trading my time for money in a project that I was clearly out of alignment for. And that's very scary, especially when you have a partner. But sometimes you just audit yourself and deep down, you know that there's something else on the horizon for you. And that was a decision that I had to make. When you do that, though, when you say no to something that is somewhat guaranteed in the gamble of betting on yourself, what happens is you're sacrificing the timing. And that's something that people don't understand, especially young entrepreneurs that have a lot of legs. They want it and they want it right now. Why is it not happening? Why isn't it happening faster for me? And when you make that leap, you obviously have to do the work. There's no doubt about it. but there's absolutely no way that you can control that timing. Having the self-awareness and the spiritual maturity to release that, to submit those things, to being faithful in that the prosperity, that opportunity is going to unlock itself if you just continue to do the right thing and submitting, releasing that you can't control that timeline. Business is a game of endurance. How long can you stay in the game? How long can you keep enough chips on the table to keep playing? I know a lot of investors and entrepreneurs who are incredibly over-leveraged right now because they felt like they weren't going fast enough. They had to scale. They had to grow faster. They have 1031 exchange money, meaning they sold an asset and they were trading up and the year was running out and they didn't want to pay the tax. And out of a scarcity mindset, they exchanged into something that ended up costing them far more money than they would have spent on just paying the tax on that income. We look at other entrepreneurs and their journey, and we oftentimes compare ourselves to that trajectory. And it's insanely frustrating because we want what we think that they have. We see them going faster and faster, and we audit ourselves and we ask ourselves, why am I not going as fast as they are? But we can't see everything that's happening inside of that machine. And if we were to open up the hood, I guarantee you it's not all honky-dory inside there. I know plenty of entrepreneurs, especially in my space right now, that are literally bleeding to death because they're over-leveraged. They're bleeding income at a rate that they cannot sustain. And sometimes going conservatively, going slowly, being prudent, doing the right thing, doing the hard work, being patient in that opportunity, submitting that timing, sometimes simply staying alive in those market cycles is how you win the game. Because as I said, business is a game of endurance. It's not the fastest trajectory. It's not the quickest multiple. Of course, we all want that. Sometimes it's just time in the game. It's duration. It's endurance. It's simply staying alive. Staying alive is winning when everybody else is burning themselves out and falling out of the game. What is a sustainable trajectory that you can maintain to not just play the game, but to finish the race? And I promise you at the end of that timeline, at the end of that trajectory, there's fruit that's waiting for you. Business is also a game of feedback. And sometimes that feedback is instant and sometimes it's extremely delayed. You can make a decision in your business that you're going to get instant verification of, was that the right choice or was that not? And other times you're going to make decisions that aren't going to come to fruition for years and years. And you just have to be faithful that you allocated enough wisdom, enough of a circle around you to audit whether or not you made the correct decision. And ultimately you have to submit that decision and wait for that feedback to come back and hope that after years of sacrifice and hard work, that decision was correct. Feedback in business isn't meant to hurt your feelings. It's a subset of data. And that data has consequence. Sometimes those consequences are good and sometimes those consequences are bad. And this is where ego and self-awareness in business really coalesces. If you have the ability to take that feedback, even if it's negative feedback, look in the mirror and reflect as a leader and ask yourself, who is responsible for this negative feedback? And is there something that I can do that can implement and integrate change to change the trajectory of that feedback? That is a key marker of a successful leader that has the ability to not only endure and stay alive, but to grow and to thrive. Sometimes when you're grinding, when you're just in it, when you're trying to grow the business, it feels like you can't see where you are or where you're going or where you're headed or the storm that's around you. You're suffocating. It's almost a choking darkness that surrounds you. And I don't know why, but it seems like those that are closest to us or just on the outside can peer into that storm, not see the chaos that we're in, and offer us an encouragement of, wow, I can really see the trajectory that you're on. I can see how successful you're going to become. I really believe in you. And as crazy as that sounds, in my experience as a solopreneur, that's extremely frustrating. It's extremely frustrating to have somebody tell you how successful they think you're going to be or that they see that you're going to be, and to lack clarity, and to be extremely vulnerable. Lacking clarity for a driven individual is almost enough to drive you to madness. And when individuals say something like that to you, the reason it's so frustrating is because as the individual that's walking in the storm, oftentimes we lose our way. we lose our way. We lose sight of the direction. We lose sight of the horizon line. All we see is this darkness, this chaos that envelops us. And that is really when we need to look down. We need to look down to Jesus as the lamp that lights our feet and focus on one single step ahead of the other. And there's really been something that has been resonating with me. My best friend Tyrell sent me this word the other day because he knows it's something that I've been struggling with recently, and that is timing. He sent me this social media clip, and the social media clip essentially summarized, it said this: when you are hearing that voice inside of your head that says, hurry up, you're not going fast enough. Hurry, you're going to lose the race. That guy's passing you. Hurry up, you're going to miss out. You need to filter and audit that voice and ask yourself, when we go to the scripture, how does Jesus talk to us? How does God talk to us? And Jesus is never in a hurry. He's never in a rush. He's never in a hurry. He's consistently saying, hey, be patient. I got you. I'm going to provide for you. I love you. It's going to be okay. And having that reminder of who's talking to me in that moment, who's talking to me, who's telling me that I'm not going to be there on time, I'm not going fast enough. Jesus is telling me, hey, relax. That's not your race. You're on your own race. That's not for you. That fruit isn't for you. I have different fruit for you. I'm going to unlock the freedom, the kingdom to you. Just settle down, endure, be persistent, submit to me, release that control, release that desire for control. You know, if I reflect on the growth, even being in that storm, being in that chaos, just reflecting on the last year, if even just this podcast alone, let alone the skill set that I've added to my tool belt, who I've had to become, the lessons I've learned, good and bad, difficult and easy, it's insane the amount of growth, the amount of refined strategy that I've been able to accumulate, to implement, to strategize with. You don't see your progress when you're in the storm. And it really takes a special muscle to meditate and reflect on how far you've come. But when you start to appreciate who you were even just 1 year ago, it's insane. It's an amount of progress that we all make. And I would encourage all of you to sit and think about that progress and really celebrate that, because that took sacrifice, that took lived experience, and ultimately that's gathering wisdom that you're going to accumulate, assemble, and wield like a weapon when it's your time. When it's your time, when those blessings are unlocked to you and you have to sit at the head of that table as a seasoned warrior, ready to do battle, ready to make those high-level decisions because you have walked through those storms before. One of the most difficult things that I've experienced as someone who's incredibly driven is lacking that vision of not knowing exactly where you're going, but having the work ethic to just continuously show up every day. It's insanely difficult. I'm a person that could absolutely move mountains a stone at a time. Just tell me, what mountain am I going to move? As soon as you give me a target, it's game over. I'll outwork everybody in the room, but not knowing which mountain to move can be so frustrating. And that's when that voice comes back in my head. You're not going fast enough. Look at your friends. They're going faster than you are. That's when we have to completely submit and listen and be reminded that he tells us to relax and to be patient, and ultimately to remember that sometimes just staying alive, that endurance, is in fact winning. Staying in the game longer than everybody else is winning. I've learned some pretty hard lessons, some good lessons this year, lessons that I would have never learned though if I wasn't playing the game. And as much adversity as it has caused me or frustration, ultimately that pressure has become a privilege. It's a privilege that I get to play this game, that I'm going through these ups and downs because it's forming me into the leader that I need to be in the future. And I'll give you just a silly example. You know, when the market is slow, your budget for marketing becomes very finite, and you have to allocate that budget very strategically. And you're constantly trying to improve. And one of the things that I'm really focusing on improving is this podcast experience for you guys, for the listeners. And in improving that podcast, I want you guys to have access to the show. I want you to be able to conversate, to text in, to express interest. And so I researched and implemented a text line that when you listen to this podcast, you can text in. Well, as most things in business that you'll learn, you know, whether it's software or website or whatever it is, they tend to be cheaper when you buy them in advance for the entire year. So I bought the year or 2-year subscription. I got a discounted price. I registered for a toll-free number. And lesson learned is I didn't have a URL set up for the podcast, a URL or a landing page or some other domain name other than my mortgage business. And so I didn't think about it, and I included that URL in the text line. There's very heavy government regulation surrounding texting and mortgages or loans or interest rates, and it's considered predatory. So what happened is that text line got frozen. And not only did that text line get frozen, they revoked that number. Now, at this point, I had already recorded ads, including that text line, paid for the production of them, and implemented them into the show, only to find out that the text line was not only frozen, but had been revoked for me. So all of my finite budget I had applied to this thing was gone. All that hard work, gone. My budget resources, gone. And it felt very frustrating. It was a week of me battling on the phone and figuring out how to overcome this and learning the lesson that if I want a text line, I can't have the word loan in it. So therefore I have to build a separate website. I wouldn't have known any of those things if I hadn't endured and battled through. And it sounds like such a small, silly thing, but when time is a commodity and your time is precious, those wasted minutes, hours, days add up to take away from the dollar productive task. It feels suffocating. It feels hopeless. It feels like, why am I doing any of this in the first place? And on the other side of that, growth is so many lessons learned that can be shared and passed on to other people that are wanting to grow in a similar manner that would have never known or had a concept that this could be an issue that they face. And that is a blessing. That's a blessing to pass on to other people. And it's a blessing to sit in this seat and grow and learn and weather those storms, as big or small as they may seem. My point to, I guess, this entire rant is that if you're out there and you feel hopeless because you don't have a purpose, you don't have clarity, you don't know what you're doing, I would challenge you to really look in reflection at everything that you have accomplished over the last year, sit in it, and appreciate it, because you have made substantial progress, whether you're paying attention or not. And these little inconveniences, they're blessing you to become who you absolutely need to become to reach that next level. And I would challenge you to sit in gratitude. You know, something that I've been really struggling with recently, which is odd because I'm a person who just wants everybody to win. I started to feel these little nagging feelings of jealousy of, individuals that I have in a peer group that I feel are extremely talented individuals, but no more or less talented than I am. And I'm watching their trajectory take off. And it's very frustrating for me. And it's not that I don't want them to win. I absolutely do. I would support them in any way that I could. But deep down inside, I felt this nagging little pain of, it's not fair. It's not fair. Why are they going faster than I'm going? And I caught myself in that this Friday as I was sitting down and journaling my thoughts. And the solution that I immediately had was to start praying for their continued and compounding success. And the only reason that I could come to that instant conclusion is because I knew that feeling of jealousy, that wasn't from God. That's the enemy. That's the enemy telling me that I'm not going fast enough. And the only way to combat that is to radically release myself from those feelings by inviting God into my life in those voids, by praying for that person that I'm feeling jealousy for, by praying that they have exponential continued growth and success and celebrating them and asking God to bring joy into my heart for that growth trend. There's absolutely more than enough for everyone. And I would encourage you, if you're feeling those same feelings, to audit it and do the same, to really start praying for the continued success of those individuals that you're feeling jealous for. And it's pretty amazing how God shows up in your life in that way and provides for you, gives you provision. Anyways, guys, those are some of the thoughts that I had journaled this week. Hopefully they were coherent. I know they were kind of all over the place, but these are things that I'm just wrestling with, that I'm kicking around in my mind at the end of the week and really asking myself hard questions and trying to pay attention to the honest answers that I give myself. So hopefully it provided you some value. I know it's been really helpful for me to write those thoughts down and articulate them myself. So other than that, if you guys are listening out there, selfishly, I'd really love to take this podcast into some interesting niches. I'm very much into health routines and wellness, longevity. So if anybody out there has an expert on longevity, wellness routines, I would love to connect with them. Other than that, we're just getting ready for the holidays. My good friend told me one time that memories are made in a couple ways. You could make memories by doing big, huge bucket list one-off items that the kids are going to resonate with and remember for a long time, or you can do something consistently. Every Friday pizza night, for example, or Christmas lights every year. And something that I've always done is Christmas lights, even before I had kids. And I always told myself, man, I can't wait till I have kids and I put up these lights every year. It's going to be such a fun memory. And now I have them. Now my kids are here and that's what I'm doing. So we're just getting ready for the holidays. We're putting up some Christmas lights so that my kids can have those memories. And pretty soon we're going to start preparing for the new year, goal setting and getting ready to continue, knowing full well, having the awareness that we're going to continue to struggle, to fall down and to battle, but ultimately prevail because we're going to stay alive. We're in this for the long run and you are too. And we're going to do this together. Thank you guys out there in the Dynamis audience. Hopefully you got some value out of this and we will catch you all next week.